The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday Morning Show, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it, weekend editions here at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel back at the ESPN studios. We are geared up, spring underway here. Nebraska already up and running this morning. Maybe a cup of coffee, a handful of Red Bull with a straw, and pads will be popping this morning for football. You needed pads last night to survive Michigan and the Nebraska women's game as they outlast Michigan 76-73. And a lot of topics to get into here as we look at spring football. Really good stuff from the media session earlier in the week with all the assistant coaches, with Coach Frost. And really found some interesting takes from some of the new assistants. Numbers to get in. We welcome you to call in at Hail Varsity Weekend, 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Can email Chris at hailvarsity.com, Mark at hailvarsity.com. And on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence for Elijah. Kraynak, what do you know? How's it going?
I'm just surprised we're sitting here acting like Nebraska basketball hasn't reeled off 2 in a row. Are we really doing that? Like, I'm trying to think of how much positive we have talked about Nebraska basketball on this show over the last, 3 years?
I think there was a high level of positivity with the Fred hire.
Okay, fair. Yes.
I think there was a high level of positivity after the NC State game with 4 overtimes.
Okay. Yeah, no, you're right. There has been a handful of times that we've done it, but they didn't even make your open.
Well,
they didn't even make your open.
Here's the thing. Like, at spring football, the Husker women are capturing the state, have captured the state. And then you have the NFL Combine performances by Beef Jerky and Austin Allen. Nebraska plays tomorrow against Wisconsin, against Chucky and company. No, it's fun. It's cool to see Nebraska win 2 in a row. It's cool to see what Nebraska basketball's done the last 2 games. The point that ticks people off is that where the hell's that been all year? Not necessarily a 20-7 record, flipping the record, but just the unselfishness. Why did it take Trev making a statement for this to all of a sudden flip? I will say this in defense. Old Verge has been a give me the basketball type guard, a 2 guard, and it can take folks a little while to learn the artistry of being a point guard, but he's been playing well. You've gotten guys that you can count on one hand in the last 2 games the number of stupid shots they've taken. And they played defense. So they themselves made right, and they made shots. They have confidence. And you know why they made shots, Mark? It was the extra pass. It was unselfishness that got him open. But just quite frankly, an issue of trust or not wanting to give up the basketball's plagued this team. In contrast, you have unselfishness. You have the extra pass. You have grittiness. You have toughness. You have rebounding. You have all of that with the Husker women. Did you watch much of last night at all?
I didn't watch last night, no, but I've seen quite a bit of
enough. Yeah.
And now, for folks not keeping up, they're in the Final Four, essentially, for the Big Ten tournament.
Well,
and take on Iowa
program. They have Iowa on the docket today.
Yeah. Yep. 5 o'clock tip, looks like.
That's what I'm thinking. Yep.
Trying to get to the championship against either Ohio State or Indiana.
Sure.
And how about Alexis Markowski, too?
We love what Alexis has done. We love covering her at Pius, and we're big Andy Markowski and Markowski family fans. Andy's a regular.
You didn't think she was going to roll up on the set first year and put up these kind of numbers, right? I mean, I don't think many people did. First year?
Elijah can find.
She'd round into that eventually.
Sure. Well, by year 2, right? But no, she was thrust into major minutes, and then she had to step up due to injury with a ton of minutes in the meat of this schedule. And guess what, man? She's a pretty high-level competitor. I mean, obviously the talents are vast, and she's big and strong and athletic. But I think the mentality part, Mark, is your difference, bud. I mean, she came in grown up, so to speak, with how she wants to attack and carve up people in the paint. And she goes about it. She's unselfish. She's gritty, and she's just like her dad. I mean, just a tough ball player. And we may have a comment. We asked Andy this week, about Alexis's transition, and that's incredible to be freshman of the year. Did you expect it? Pretty much is the question. How did this happen? Good for you, because there's a lot that goes from playing at PBA a year ago at this time to playing in Chicago a year from now. A year from then.
Yeah, of course, and they're gonna have their work cut out for them today against Iowa. It's a team that's had Nebraska's number this year. Has two. Basically 10-point wins, 93-83 and 95-86. So maybe not a great matchup, but you got Jazz Shelley playing better now too, picking up the slack from behind the 3-point line when Nebraska lost quite a bit with the suspension of Scoggin or the removal of Scoggin from the roster. I guess what did she go for 9 threes against Illinois? So it's a team that's dangerous. You said it, man. They have a brand, they play a certain distinct style, and it's pretty high octane. They're not standing around that's been a complaint about the men's team for so long. It's just like they just stand there, and then one person goes to work. It's like that is not happening when you watch Amy Williams' team. They move the ball, and they move it with purpose, and they play with pace, and they're really aggressive. They're a really aggressive offensive team, and they're aggressive enough defensively.
Mark Kraynak with us, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Weekend Edition, Hail Varsity Radio. We'll have a rewind, a one-on-one sit-down with Bill Bush, Nebraska Special Teams Coordinator, coming up here in about 15 minutes or so. Kraynak, I want to talk about some spring topics. And we know about Garrett Nelson's optimism. We heard from Coach Applewhite when it comes to the standard he wants at running back. Donnie Raiola touched on the mentality that needs to happen on the offensive line. There's Mark Whipple with the quarterback room and just the offense in general. And then, of course, Mickey Joseph. I thought Mickey was great when it comes to talking about some of those guys that you've seen flashes from, but you need consistent stud performances in the receiver room. Omar Manning, Xavier Betts, specifically with what he wants to get out of those kids in the receiver room, the slot position, and just what Mickey's expecting here. Because I think you have an offense that if they put it together could be pretty impressive, a lot of fun. And I think there's just really a no-nonsense approach from Whipple. And the other kind of important part of this past week was just the burden that Coach Frost always looked like he was wearing. And you look at a president at the time of them taking office compared to the time they leave office, they've aged 500 years, right, with the stress. You look at old Frosty from the hiring date to the end of last season, he is aged years just because of the stress and obviously the struggle. And now it feels like he'll have quite a bit of help that he can lean on. And I think there's some comfort there, Kraynak. I think there's some comfort with Frost this spring. I think there's some excitement because they can go get things figured out on offense. They don't have to play Saturday.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. And, you talk about the no-nonsense and time for result. It matches, Mickey Joseph and had that attitude. It matches where the fans are at now. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, it matches where the media's expectations are now. It matches where everybody's at. Look, if you look at the state of Nebraska's program, you are generally happy with things like strength and conditioning, things like facilities and momentum for facility. You're generally happy with the apparatus around football, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, wouldn't you say that? Like the media team is good and they pump out awesome videos, and the recruiting engine seems okay after kind of a year off. It's been rejuvenated. You see how Austin Allen and Cam Jurgens, and soon you'll see how Cam Taylor-Britt and JoJo Doman perform at the Combine. You feel like development is there. The strength is good, the nutrition, all of that stuff. Where are the wins? It doesn't make sense, man. It just doesn't. And it's time to get W's. And it's time to find those guys that are going to get you there and that care about the result. We can talk all about it's about the process and the journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. Well, sometimes it's a sprint, right? Like
Kraynak, you're in the back. You're in the back seat right now, asking, "Are we there yet?"
Come on, right?
on this journey, right?
This journey. It's not a journey. It's Purdue. Knock them off.
Stop losing to Purdue.
And while you're reeling in talent like Omar Manning, like Xavier Betts, I hope it's Joseph that is the guy that can pull the most out of them. Because the talent is obviously there. Mm-hmm. Obviously. And for a game or two, you'll get the production to match. It's like, what about 12 of those games? How about that? Right? And so, look, I feel the urgency around the team. I think it's welcome. Coaching transitions are hard, but at least from the outside looking in, it appears that the current crop they're ingratiating themselves to the team. They're being accepted, right? You're not having some weird resistance like you might have had like when Riley and his staff came in. Mm-hmm. And they changed some things up. There was these weird team. I don't sense that. I don't sense that with these guys at all. So you hope it pays off.
Kraynak, let's dive into something Whipple talked about, and that's getting the ball to the best player. Who's Nebraska's best guy on offense? Do we know? Don't think so. Who do you think that guy could be?
We can't answer. Yeah, I don't know. You can't answer that question.
Not yet.
You can't say it's not Vokalek. He's good.
But
you can't say he's best player.
No.
You can't say it's Betts because you just haven't seen
the consistency thing.
Yeah, can't say it's Manning. Can't say it's Alante Brown. Can't say
Ramirez?
It's Yant.
Do you go with Ramirez?
No. I don't think he has best player on the team ability, to be honest.
That's fine, but I'm saying, well, there's production. I mean, he's it. I mean, he's been your most consistent guy.
I think the fact he can't answer this question is pretty telling.
That's the point. I mean, that's part of the task, right? In the Whipple offense, let's force feed the best player on the team and make him stop said best player. Being in that best player on the team on 3rd and 3 got a shotgun snap and ran for 4, or was asked to bail the team out in a 1-score game, or had a 2-minute drill opportunity to drive the field for a win. He's down in Manhattan right now. Your best player packed up and is gone. And you're wondering about Casey Thompson, super talent. You're wondering about the JUCO running back, Anthony Grant. Is he a guy that emerges? You're wondering about Yant. You're wondering about Omar and Manning. I should say Omar and Betts with what they can do, right? And then Vogel's out with the injury. So, yeah, I mean, that's what's cool about this spring is you're going to have to find 2 or 3 dudes that are your go-tos because the roster's there for you it's there for the taking.
Yeah. And don't you feel like I do feel like that you have viable options. I think there's been some years where you look in, you come into the year and you're like, geez, I hope this one person in particular steps up because that's kind of your only option at insert position here. But I do really feel like you have plenty of capable players. And it's just, it's almost like math that a couple of them are going to grab hold, right? Like just probability wise, things are looking good that somebody's going to grab a hold of this thing. You have plenty of backs. Anthony Grant looks good in these few videos that we've seen that have come out.
Yeah.
He looks fast.
Explosive.
He looks like he has burst. Everybody's
there's
talking
no
about
one. There's no one hitting him. There's no one hitting him.
Isn't that great? That's his specialty. People try to hit him, and they can't.
He doesn't get hit. Yes.
No.
I love it.
He doesn't.
Kraynak, we'll get into this with Sharpie coming up as we wind down here. We'll hear from Bill Bush coming up as well, Nebraska special teams coach. Great to sit down with Coach Bush again. What's your take on kind of the feedback? And this came out yesterday, and Mitch Sherman tweeted it out, and you're a little closer to the situation. But you had Zane Flores out of Gretna, right? Talented quarterback. You know that Zane has been offered by K-State and then Oklahoma State and then Coach Leipold down at Kansas. And that's great. That's incredible. That's impressive. But now Ohio State's quarterback coach got into contact with Flores, and they are working on getting him up to Columbus to work him out and then maybe offer him. We'll see how he does. He was at a junior day in Lincoln and I was told didn't have the best workouts. That's just one workout. He's got a great body of work at Gretna. So you have this reaction of, okay, what the hell? Nebraska has a quarterback that Ohio State's interested in state. There's this renewed emphasis for in-state recruiting. You've seen it. There's a bunch of 2023 kids. And meanwhile, you go get Watson out of Massachusetts as your 2023 guy. What do you think about this situation here with Nebraska maybe having yet another in-state quarterback, and this may be another in-state kid that gets away?
Yeah, it's difficult. It's something to watch because when Oklahoma State when they came into the picture, that woke me up a little bit. Kansas State, you can understand. Really I think that's happened. Yeah, that's happened quite a bit where you have these Division I quarterbacks that Kansas State's interested in that Nebraska's not, and they go to K-State and they don't light it up, and they're okay players, but they're not great, and so it's sort of like that. Okay, that's fine. You're not really worried about K-State offering quarterbacks, but Oklahoma State. Hey, now, I mean that's an offense that routinely puts up numbers,
big time,
and routinely has quarterbacks that put up ungodly numbers and play a certain style. And I'm just sort of like, okay, because it's not like any of us are, good enough college talent evaluators to really know the nuanced differences of what they're looking for. But when I see Zane Flores, to me, he looks good enough to play Division I football. Right? I'm just like, yeah, quick release, good size,
wins,
really good arm strength. Yeah, wins games, dual threat. Like, yeah, he looks good. I don't know what separates him from being a Akron quarterback to a Nebraska quarterback, totally. It's a little tough to pick out. But now if you have Ohio State sniffing around, which, look, Ohio State basically drafts, they don't recruit. So, he's on their radar. They're looking at him as a late rounder if the other ones fall through. It's not like he's their priority quarterback right now. They have their pick of the litter. But if he offers and Nebraska doesn't, or if Ohio State offers and Nebraska doesn't,
that's the hand grenade, and you need to. And Jacob Padilla and Elijah hit on this yesterday. Listen, you recruit to a scheme, you recruit to a fit, and where's the fit with a Flores in reference to what Watson did? And you had the hierarchy here, right? And as a Nebraska fan, you look at what's the quarterback board look like? Well, you had Johnson out of Maize, Kansas, right? You had Cole out of Iowa. And then you had those two guys that were kind of the priority. They were looked at. Nebraska got in late on Johnson. And then here's the connection you have with Whipple and Watson back in Massachusetts all the way back to 6th grade. This is really Whipple's guy. And this is who he wanted, and now you have Flores, kind of has always been like sort of around the radar, and I don't see Nebraska taking a second quarterback unless somebody in that quarterback room leaves, which could happen.
Well, but if you look at the snapshot of all the quarterbacks you have now, and who has eligibility, how many of them are back next year? Probably not all of them.
Right.
How many are back the year after that? Probably even more are gone. It's just the reality of it. So the thing that makes the in-state recruiting and the thing that bugged me about Joe Burrow back in the day, because just for all intents and purposes, you almost consider him an in-state recruit because of the legacy, right? Mm-hmm. So when it comes to legacy and in-state, the same rules apply. And that's, what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? You already have a transient roster where 33% of guys come and go anyways. So don't act like, oh, there's no room on this team. There will be room, like tomorrow. It changes all the time. The roster is constantly shifting. So that's no good excuse, because you can make it work. And then two, what are they going to be? Are they going to be a locker room cancer? Are they going to not work hard? Are they going to not culturally understand it? No. They will most likely come in and be among the hardest workers, completely understand the gravity of all the situations. And they won't be locker room cancers. They will be team players. Like, if you're an in-stater or if you're a legacy, that's just how you're going to. So what's the worst that can happen? You have this great locker room guy that works his earth off for 4 years but doesn't start? Cool. Right? That doesn't hurt you. Pushes the other guys. It's just, Well,
it goes back. It kind of goes back to Noah Walters. Like, dude got a D1 offer and he's at North Alabama, and that just locally around here, Lincoln, that hacked a lot of us off that have seen him play and thrive for a lot of years. I mean, is he a scholarship offer? I mean, I don't know. I'm not a college Division I coach, but damn, I think he's good. I think Flores is good. And now there's two things here. One, what was the communication like from Nebraska to Flores in the wintertime? All right. We don't know. Good, bad, ugly, we don't know. Two, if you win, it really don't matter. I mean, if Watson comes in and wins the job here in a few years, we're getting way down the pike here, but I mean, but you know how it is. It's week of spring ball, and if he's good enough for Ohio State, how come he's not good enough for Nebraska? That's some of the fan sentiment out there.
Well, I think it's fair, though. I think it's fair. You don't have enough Division I guys every year in the state of Nebraska where you can afford to be picky about them. What do you get? Like 6, 7, 8 players, maybe, out of the state that are Division I scholarship worthy?
It's growing. I mean, this weekend it's Hall out of Bell West. It's Maverick Noonan. It's Malachi Coleman. There's 3 in-state dudes for 2023, and then there's so many other Iowa and Kansas City and Missouri and Kansas prospects and targets they're going after. So we'll talk a little recruiting coming up. We always invite you to download and subscribe to the podcast, Hail Varsity Radio. Take us with on your time and give us a review, good, bad, or ugly. We'll take it. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play is where you can find Hail Varsity Radio. Hour 2, we're excited to check in with Brandon Vogel. And Kraynak, maybe we can talk some Nebraska basketball men with Vogues, since we aren't giving Fred and the crew enough credit for 2 wins in a row.
Or baseball, God. 1 win in a row.
That hurt. That hurt last night. The walk-off loss, man.
Yeah.
They got to bounce back. That was a little rough. But we'll
Cody Frank, huh?
Frank was money, man. 6 in the third and 10 strikeouts, and that's what you need. Good stuff from Cody Frank yesterday. But Bill Bush on the way. We'll step away as we continue on a weekend edition Hail Varsity presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Back with Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery, with Chris Schmidt and Mark Kraynak.
Back with you at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Let's talk some college football, some spring football. And Gary Barnett with us, Hall of Fame coach, Northwestern and Colorado, also at Missouri. Coach, I mean, scale of 1 to 10, how bad's the struggle right now with your golf game?
Well, with 10 being the worst, I'd say it's maybe 10.5 right now. So
what's going wrong?
It just comes and goes. Right now, it's my driver, and so I just don't have any rhythm with it. I'm tinkering too much, and probably listening to too many articles and reading too much. So I can do that. I can overthink this thing pretty easily.
Well, at least you're having fun overthinking. Just get a new driver, Coach.
Well, that's always been my solution in the past, Chris, but that gets expensive.
I bet. Well, I want to talk.
But you can trade them in. You can just trade them in. They're highly negotiable. So.
Well, there's new technology out every year, man. You got to stay up, right? So, well, let me know how that goes. I want to get your thoughts. When it comes to this time of year, spring football, and had a lot of fun earlier in the week with the round table with the Nebraska assistants and the spring football press conference. Your thought, Coach, on just that urgency in spring, and would like your take on your approach for looking at a player. Nebraska's got a lot of 3- and 4-year guys at different spots, but some of the secondary, some on the defensive line. What was kind of your rule of thumb with moving on from a kid or sticking with a kid that maybe hadn't popped yet? Might have been a high-profile recruit. How did you assess all of that here with when it came to development or going to the next guy?
Well, there's 2 things I would immediately jump out as you just delivered those 2 questions. One is the number one thing is there is no urgency in spring ball, and the minute you start to think there is, you're going to overlook something. The beauty of spring ball is you can take it as slow as you want to go, as slow as you need to go, and you got to assess that need. But there is no sense of urgency. You don't have to have anything ready at the end of the spring football. At the end of the spring, you probably have a pretty good idea where your defense is, but your offense is. There's so much time for your offense to continue to improve at the end of spring football that you don't want to rush to judgments, and you don't want to be too quick with all that stuff, and you don't want to overlook anything. At this point in time, spring football is about going back to basics and ingraining a groove, a practice, techniques, that sort of stuff. You don't have to have a game. You have to be game ready on Saturday. You don't have to see any film. You don't have to watch an opponent. So it's all about making every player better and seeing how things progress, experimenting with different players at different positions, experimenting with offensive plays or defensive schemes. It's truly, for me, was a really fun time. As far as the guys go, the kids go, the players, I had a standing rule: apples don't ripen at the same time. And so, you really only, when you look at recruiting classes, and I don't care where you are, if you hit on 50% of your guys that you recruit start, you're doing pretty well. So it comes with the business. Things just don't develop. Players quit developing. Players end up with different issues. Coaches leave, and so that hurts their development. There's just so many things that factor in to why and when a kid all of a sudden develops, or if he doesn't develop. So, again, I preach patience. I always preach patience, and you sit in their living room, and you've promised to be a surrogate father to every one of these young men. And so you have to carry out that responsibility. If you say you're going to do something, do it. Mm-hmm. And so that means you don't give up on your own kid after 2 years or 3 years. Now, if it's in his best interest and he knows it, then the two of you have a discussion and you help him get someplace else. But it's got to be mutual. The young man has got to come to the conclusion that he just probably isn't going to fit in. He's not going to get to play. Some guys there came to Nebraska because they love Nebraska. And that's value, and that's valuable. That's valuable in the locker room. And so you want to be very, very careful with all that. And you want to meet all your responsibilities. Everything that you said you were going to do, you want to do. The minute you start falling back or not delivering on what you said you were going to do, you lose your locker room. So, that's very, you got to be very careful with that. You've got all these new assistants. And, not everybody's going to, jive with them right away. So you got to have time. And that's the beauty of spring football.
The vibe and mood and kind of feel with Scott Frost. Gary Barnett's with us. He seemed way more relaxed this spring, even though there's some urgency, and you touched on what spring's all about. Coach, knowing Coach Whipple like you do, how's his expertise, his experience going to help Scott out? It's spring, it's not fall, I get it, but how's he going to be able to lighten the pressure, if there is such a thing, with Scott?
Well, Whip's been through everything, okay, and he's learned through every one of those situations you go through. If you don't learn, it was a waste of time. And so he's learned, and Scott can learn from that. Scott's learned, the way he reacted so many times this fall, he knows they're close. And so if you've done this long enough, and Whipple has, and some of these other guys have, then it's a process, and you just don't change it overnight. And they were so close. It reminds me of in 2000, we were almost exactly the same thing. We almost, about the same record, and I think we may have lost one game by double digits, but all the other games we lost by single digits. And then we all knew it was close, but we had to put the noise out. We had to shut the noise off because, everybody's clamoring and everybody's got an opinion why you're not any good, why you're not winning. And then all of a sudden, the kids had confidence, coaches had confidence coming out of spring ball, and we took that same season, and we had the great 2001 season we had. And I see Nebraska right on the verge of that same sort of thing. There was just too many good things that happened last year, And so many pundits have written the same thing. Everybody knows it. You got through it. Here's the beauty. He got through it. He survived. Not all of his coaches survived. He survived. So now let's use all that valuable experience and education we got last year going through this and turn it into the next level. So, that's what's going on in those meetings.
Gary Barnett's with us a few minutes, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, I want to go back to that 2000 season. Is that the year you took the Buffalo decal off the helmet?
We took that off. Yeah, I think it was. It caused some stirs. We only took it off for a game.
No, but I mean, you guys won at A&M the next week. I mean, you got the result, right?
That's right, and we beat A&M. Exactly right.
How from that motivational tactic? How did kids react to that? What was that experience like?
Oh, it wasn't a fun experience for any of us. I mean, it was a really hard decision to do, and if I wouldn't have done it if the idea hadn't come from a couple former Buffalo players that were on my staff, John Embry and Bieniemy, and a couple other guys, Brian Cabral. There's no way I would have done it without consulting with former players, and so it caused a ruckus. I can tell you that, and it caused a ruckus in our locker room. But sometimes that's what you need. You need that to happen. You get complacent, or it needs to be shaken up every once in a while. So I would say, if you were judging that decision, would you do it all over again? I probably wouldn't.
Okay.
But I did, and it so happened that we upset a big team the next week. So, maybe it worked. It wasn't fun doing it, I can tell you that.
Did you just take arrows for all week? I mean, you probably
I took arrows. I was wearing arrow shirts for a month. And, all sorts of arrows, yeah.
Gary Barnett's with us. Coach, Athletic has a good story out. David Ubben is projecting 5 teams to make a leap. And anytime you're in company with these names, I think it's a good thing. But they've all underachieved. I don't know that A&M did so much, as the way they finished was pretty strong. But Clemson was still 10-3. The 5 teams: SC, Florida, Nebraska, A&M, and Clemson. Do you agree with those 5 picks as we look forward to fall? Are these 5 teams you think could make a big leap?
Well, you're in pretty good company.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the recruiting base and history at Clemson. That's not a hard pick. And you see what's happened in the recruiting to A&M, and what a potential great place that is. So that one's not hard to pick. SC, it certainly isn't that hard, especially when you see the accumulation of talent they've had through the portal just in 6 months. So that one's not hard. Florida, that's a little tougher pick for me, I think, just because a new coach, new system, and I'm not sure that's one I would have put in that. I'm not sure who else I would have put in. I have to do the research on it, but I don't think that's one I would have put in there. So you're in pretty good company, and then Nebraska, so it's pretty good company that you're in.
Well, what do you the names say it all, and I think SC's, like you touched on, is good. I think A&M could, Jimbo keeps recruiting at a high level. I don't know what his quarterback situation is. I know Clemson was young on the lines of scrimmage last year, but they're pretty loaded talent-wise. When you look at Nebraska, is it a big ask to see a monster jump with a new, not completely new staff, but a lot of new staff in a first year?
It's a bit of a reach, I think, but you've got enough players around, and you had valuable experience last year. I think the key is going to be quarterback. Now, we did it in 2001 with a quarterback who managed the game, and so we could rely on our offensive line, our running backs. and then our defense, especially our secondary. So we had all the holes filled. We needed a quarterback who wouldn't make mistakes, could throw the ball accurately, and get us in the right play. And we didn't need much more out of him. And that's pretty much what we had. We had two different quarterbacks that year. And so this game today is more of a quarterback-oriented process. And so I think it really comes down at this point in time this year is to how Casey Thompson plays.
Gary Barnett's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Yeah, Casey, can he stay healthy? And it sounds like from a leadership standpoint, he's really done well with his team. Coach, last thought, let's talk swag for a moment. Saw this story about recruiting swag, and it kind of went into Kevin Sumlin showing up in a helicopter for recruiting. What's the fanciest you ever got for making a trip to a recruit's house?
I never wanted to do something like that. I never wanted to make that statement. The only thing I ever did that was close to that is I might have 5 or 6 or 7 assistants all show up at one kid's house in one day. And so it was a fight with the AD as to why in the world I would have 7 assistants all fly to someplace in the middle of nowhere, and the cost of that was always an issue at Colorado. But that's about the most. I used to go to I'll tell you how I was different. I used to go by myself to most of those to recruits' house. I didn't necessarily like going with another one of my players. Coaches. I'd like to show up by myself. And to me, I thought that made a bigger statement than anything else. So it's just how you view it, perceive it.
Man, the limos, old Jack Pierce.
Yeah, I never did that. Never did that.
Jack he'd always say, "Well, we're going to get a Cadillac, Tom." he made Coach Osborne rent a Cadillac.
Yeah. Well. Yeah, and it's a different time now. So.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Coach, good luck with the golf game. Thanks for a few minutes.
You bet, bud. Good being with you, Chris.
The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday Morning Show, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it. It's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio Weekend, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel. We heard from Gary Barnett last half hour in the rewind. We'll get Bill Bush loaded up and hear from the Nebraska special teams coach in future editions of the Weekend Hail Varsity. And going to welcome in managing editor with HailVarsity.com and magazine, Brandon L. Vogel, with us on Twitter's where you follow him. Vogues, what are you doing this morning? Thanks for the time.
Got up at about 7, got the smoker going, so do some barbecue today, and enjoy that while watching the women's basketball. Hopefully continue their march through, March.
No, that's about right. Now, what are we putting on the smoker, Vogues?
No, just a pork butt. Just to do some pulled pork. Kind of I want to barbecue today, but I just decided so like 12 hours ago. So it's pretty simple and straightforward, and produces that typically pretty consistent results. So nothing too elaborate.
You still doing the mustard over the top of it?
You're coated.
You need the binder for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you ever get like crazy with mustard? I mean, do you go, I don't know, the Grey Poupon route, or is it just the yellow Frenches?
No, it's not even the yellow Frenches. It's the grocery store brand yellow mustard. Because if I'm just going to use it to basically get the spices to stick to this huge hunk of pork, because you don't taste it. Like it's on the smoker for so long that you get no real mustard flavor from it. So whatever's 89 cents or less, that'll work for this purpose.
Hey, you read Brandon Vogel because he's incredible. You follow Brandon Vogel because he's incredible, and then he has barbecue advice that is, quite frankly, to die for. You are the brains behind the short ribs because you said, brother, put them in hot sauce. And that bind was incredible, and it didn't smoke anyone out. No pun intended. I mean, it wasn't too hot. The binding's the key.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, I know like the pure barbecue purists are just like, just salt and pepper. That's all you need, and you can make really good barbecue that way. I mean, barbecue is mostly about fire management, depending on how you do it. So, and having a lot of patience. So,
well, this leads into football beautifully for spring between patience and fire management. Okay, so what position group on the offense is going to be the one that binds this team?
I think you got an outside shot at quarterback. We know Kate Thompson is Mark Whipple told you straight up. He was first-team quarterback on day one, and Chuba Purdy is a little nicked up or whatever is happening there. So I think you always have a chance with the quarterback there. I think the best development for Nebraska, however, would be if it becomes the offensive line. Not just in the kind of classic, you got to be good on the line to win football games. And there's that piece of it. But, you think back to the great Nebraska teams, and those O-lines were not just very, very good and good as a unit and also good individually and winning all these individual accolades. They were, kind of a key piece of binding that team together. So if Nebraska were able to get close to that in 2022, I think that's the best way forward.
And what is the likelihood of that? Let's be honest.
I have no idea. I have no idea the likelihood of anything with Nebraska football so far going into 2022. I mean, I feel like the defense will be okay. And I don't mean okay like they're going to go back to average. I would expect them, just based on what they lost, to maybe take a slight step back in a couple of categories. But so far, Eric Shenander and his staff's track record at Nebraska is really pretty strong. And it feels like the known here. Offensively, you could tell me almost anything would happen over there. And it's kind of tough to refute at this point. I mean, it's hard somebody's going to lead the team in rushing. Somebody's going to lead the team in reception. Somebody's going to lead the team in passing. But it's hard to point to any one person and say, well, that's clearly the guy that's going to do that.
Vogues, wanted to get your take here on, you mentioned the defensive side of the ball. We've hit on the offensive side a little bit, but just your overall takeaway from Monday. Is there an assistant that you were intrigued by, or even speak a moment on Frost, just his mood and kind of vibe? What did you think? Just overall mood, I guess, going into the spring. How does it feel and seem to you?
Yeah, with Frost, I guess these things could seem contradictory, but off the top, he seemed pretty relaxed to me. And I mean, I know it's kind of easy to feel that way at the start of spring, but relaxed while being a little bit energized. We are past the tough coaching decisions that had to be made at the end of last year. And part of that never goes away with, I think, the relationship he had with some of those coaches who are no longer here. But yeah, you have to move forward. Nebraska has some real urgency to make their record reflect what they've actually been, and hopefully even better than what they've actually been. So there's that piece of it too. But now it feels like we have fully kind of closed the back cover on that previous book, and we're starting a new one. And I think or at least I got a little bit of a sense of that from Frost. Among the among the coaches, I don't know if it was surprising, but I sat there and watched all 20 or 25 minutes of Mickey Joseph and came away really impressed. Just you could see with the way that he, talked about players and how he's so good at forming those connections. And, he's a guy who's been at a place like LSU for a long time and obviously played at Nebraska. He's been where, these places where the attention is that intense and doesn't, not a surprise again, but doesn't seem to bother him at all. It's like, we're here to get this done. So I came away even seeing more, I think, of what we probably expected when Nebraska made that hire.
Brandon Vogel is with us on Hail Varsity Radio. You saw Brian Applewhite in a video released by the athletic department and got a few running back snippets, few highlights. And in particular, at least in that video, it's a small snapshot, but Anthony Grant, couple house calls. Do you think he moves to the top of that depth chart? Like, what does that running back depth chart look like to you coming out of spring?
Yeah, coming out of spring, I mean, I think he's got a really good chance, and you bring a guy like that in for that reason, and Nebraska's had it hasn't had a perfect track. Well, nobody has a perfect track record. It hasn't had the strongest track record doing that from the junior college level of late. So if that were to be the case, I would consider that a pretty good development. I look at this running back room as, he's kind of one of the change agents. I think Yant has the opportunity to be a mover this spring. We know about what it took why he didn't play previously, saw him in spurts, saw him look pretty promising at times. And now it's kind of like, okay, you've had this kind of message of here's what you need to do to get on the field. We like your talent. We see it. We need you to do X, Y, and Z for us to be fully able to utilize it. Has that message fully seeped in now? And do we see a different kind of approach in the spring? Then you got kind of the rest of the group who are all there, and Ramir Johnson might start out just based on last year near the top of the group, but he's probably going to have the same approach and same work ethic, I think, that got him on the field last year to maintain that spot.
Vogues, a thought with you mentioned the running backs, and I want to get your take on inside linebacker, Bud. I mean, we know that Reimer's dinged, and I think both those linebackers really played their butt off. But by season's end, I mean, there was a monster toll. And to be fair, they weren't what they were, and nor should they be, even at midseason or Michigan State weekend, okay? They need a rotation to go, and you've got some names. You've got Maga Clements, that's a senior. He's been around. You got Snodgrass that's dinged as well. So you have Henrich, but Gabor and Randy Kapai and Seth Malcolm. How vital is it, in your opinion, that we see some other inside backers flash this spring?
Yeah, I think it's pretty important. You've got Kolarovich there, although Eric Shenander said, now they're looking at him as a little bit in the nickel spot. So could see some movement with that. I mean, the guys that you mentioned, you've got this kind of redshirt freshman class coming up with three guys in there between Malcolm, Kabayor, and Kapai, and you'd really like to see one of those guys have a really strong spring. Ernest Hausman, true freshman, I'm high on him long term, but it would be a big ask to kind of be up and going for your first fall. I mean, it's tough for any true freshman, but you're talking inside linebacker in the Big Ten. That's just there's outside the SEC, you're not going to get a much more physical demand than playing that position in this league. So, I think Nebraska will be okay. It'll be a good spring for some of those guys to have that opportunity and really get a lot of reps, because you look at guys like Reimer and Henrich, like, they don't need a ton of reps right now. They played a ton of reps last year, which, as you noted, was sort of the problem by the time you got to year's end. So Nebraska got an opportunity to build depth. I mean, you look at that linebacker group, not just inside, but outside with your top two there and Nelson and Tanner. I mean, it's probably the best position group on the team. And if you can be really good at linebacker in this league, you've got a shot. I mean, I think that helps Nebraska kind of cover up the other two parts of this defense, the other two levels where they are replacing, a good amount of production in secondary and on the line.
When you look across the defense, losing JoJo Doman really just it's a big deal, because he's such a havoc guy. He's good off the edge, putting pressure on the quarterback. He, intercepts passes. He covers really well. Is there anybody defensively that stands out as that sort of off-script playmaker? Who do you think has that potential on the defensive side of the ball for Nebraska?
Yeah, I mean, I think Reimer and Henrich have that ability. Now, part of what allowed them to just eat up tackles between the two of them is that they can also just be really kind of heady and be where they're supposed to be. And the defensive line did a really good job of doing that in front of them too. I think Miles Farmer has the potential to be that kind of player. I mean, you see, he's a safety, but, the way things work in today's college football, one of your safeties a lot of the time is going to be used to help against the run, particularly in the Big Ten, where you see a lot of run-heavy teams. And I like Miles Farmer coming out of high school, so maybe it's a little bit of confirmation bias I'm hoping for here. But I think he is the player who kind of has the size and the greatest improvisational toolkit to become that player that you're just like, yeah, somehow he's always around the ball and somehow he's always making plays. He's a pretty valuable kind of Swiss Army knife type player in my mind.
Brandon Vogel's with us here, Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Brandon, in the same vein to that last question, who on the defense do you think has the opportunity to make the biggest leap between last year and this year?
It might be Hutmacher in the middle. I mean, Nebraska, we'll see how spring practices continue to shake out. But right now, it looks to me like they've got a lot of chips on his development, because there's not a ton of guys when you go down the roster and look like, oh yeah, well that's your tackle, that's your guy in the middle. He is one. I think, I'm forgetting which player said it at this point. Might have been Nelson. You mentioned, he's probably the strongest guy on the team. Storied high school wrestler, like a guy who came to Nebraska with a ton of expectations, got his chance to get some snaps in last year. And now Nebraska really needs him to take a jump. And I think the potential is there for him to do it. So he's the first one I'd highlight on defense.
Going to jump in real quick, Vogues, before Kraynak has a hoops question for you. Expectations for Fidone this spring, aside from stay healthy?
Yeah, pretty high. I mean, you play who could lead this team in receiving yards or receptions game, and you got a bunch of options. None of them feel like a sure thing, and Fidone isn't yet either. We haven't seen enough of him. But you look at the skill set, you look at some of what Whipple did at Pitt, and just his versatility, all the ways he can be a potential matchup problem for teams if he comes along as expected. He's one who I would put, like, it wouldn't surprise me if we got to the end of the year and you've got a quote-unquote tight end who I think if he were to lead the team in receiving in some capacity would be used pretty creatively. So you mentioned Nebraska has a lot of chips on Hutmacher. I kind of view them as having a lot of chips on Fidone, too, this spring.
Kraynak, are you muted, bud?
Yeah, I was there. My bad. I got a hoops question, and I'm going to describe a few of the players and then just kind of get your take here on maybe what you agree or disagree with and then the ramifications. So at point guard, you have Alonzo Verge, where I do not think it's hyperbole. He's among the quickest and best ball handlers in the nation. I don't think there's any question about that. Dude can shake anybody at any point. You have Bryce McGowens, who's the rising freshman, who is increasingly getting more aggressive and finding more ways to score. You got his brother Trey, who's a defensive stalwart. You have Derek Walker, who is, maybe playing out of position as a 5, but just an effective 4. Really good field goal percentage, pretty solid player. But it kind of feels like maybe one of the sparks that has changed Nebraska's fortunes recently is C.J. Wilcher, who's all of a sudden becoming this assassin from three-point land and getting more minutes as Hoiberg has shortened his bench. You put all that together, and it's still tough for me to fathom the results that this team has had considering the individual pieces that they have on the roster. Am I overselling their talent? I don't think they're very big. I think that hurts them in the Big Ten in particular, size-wise. Yeah. But, man, it's not like you're lacking for skill and ability on this team.
No, you're definitely not lacking for skill on the team. And I think, the size piece of it is there. And I think part of the reason, we look at Derek Walker, and he's kind of one of the most universally beloved members of this team, and because he plays really well down there, but you can also, to go back to a Bob Diaco term, you can see the strain. It's tough when you're a 6'9" in the Big Ten, and Purdue's going to come out and just run an ever-ending stream, it seems, of guys that are 7'3" or so. It's hard in there, and it's not the ideal setup, but Derek Walker puts in the effort, and he has success doing it. So you really see it with him. Verge has been he has a wide variance between being maddening at times and being really good, and he's been really good of late. I mean, I think you look at these last 2 games for Nebraska, and the fact that they came after Alberts comes out and said, yeah, Hoiberg's our guy going into next season. And to me, this was definitely reading between the lines, but it was an indication of just how heavy this season had gotten for everyone involved, coaches, support staff, and certainly the players, that they were able to come out and play a little bit more freely and just play basketball a little bit. That goes back to coaching. You can't let these seasons where things maybe take a turn early or even a third of the way into the season. Your job as a coach is to be able to overcome that or not be impacted by it, but it didn't happen that way. And now that a little bit of that pressure has been relieved, we've seen some encouraging results. Win again tomorrow, that's called a winning streak. It has happened before. It just doesn't feel like it in Nebraska.
Vogues, how much money you throwing out in Vegas on Nebraska to keep this Jimmy V run going here in the Big Ten tournament? Are you going to get weird?
Well, I haven't looked yet at their Big Ten tournament title odds, but the good news is this track record leading up to it means you should get pretty log odds. So really, you could throw a 20 spot down on the Huskers to win the Big Ten title, and if you lose, maybe you just have a couple fewer cups of coffee the next week, no big deal. But if you win,
you buy a Russian yacht.
That's big to reinvest in the NCAA tournament.
There we go. Vogue's always thinking. Vogues, have a good weekend. Enjoy the pulled pork, man. Thanks for a few minutes.
Yep. Thanks a lot, guys.
There he is, Brandon Vogel with us, HailVarsity.com and magazine, at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. I would do it, Kraynak. You're closer to Council Bluffs than I am. I need to Venmo you some money. And let's just put $50 on Nebraska men to go Jimmy V.
What would that turn into?
A hell of a lot of beer and nachos for us.
I mean, what would that yield?
It would be the most of all the maddening Nebraska basketball seasons and teams and getting your hopes up. It would be, full Monty Nebraska basketball. Watch, only to lose in the first round again.
I know.
Oh, we drew Duke. Sweet.
I'm looking up what are Nebraska's odds and what would $50 turn into to make the tournament. Might take a little bit to find
just to make the tournament. Look up win the tournament. Come on.
Yeah, Big Ten tournament. Yeah.
No, I'm talking NCAA tournament. Look up the odds to win the NCAA tournament.
No. I mean,
if you're going to go big.
You are one that F-150, brother. That's pretty good. Let's take a quick time out. Weekend edition of Hail Varsity continues. And get the podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Hail Varsity Radio, and also on YouTube. The Iron Horse up next. Gary Sharp with us on Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Glad to have you back.
Yes, sir. You heard me right.
Here are the guys, Schmidt and Kraynak.
Well, Hector, here's the game plan. You're going to bring us 2 absolute martinis. You know how I like them, straight up. And then precisely 7.5 minutes after that, you're going to bring us 2 more. Then 2 more after that every 5 minutes until one of us passes out.
Excellent strategy, sir.
Thanks for making time. Weekend edition at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbel. We welcome in the Iron Horse, and we have done some research. The dear friend of the show, Iowa Russ, chiming in with Big Ten basketball championship odds. So you drop $50 to win $10,000. Gary Sharp, would you like to make an investment? How are you?
You know what? I'm pretty protective of my money. I play smart money, so I think I will hold off. But good morning, guys. It's now March. It's been kind of mad this week, huh?
It's just a touch, my friend. It is. How much did you bleed last night just watching the Nebraska women absorb all of those non-calls against Michigan?
Ooh, that was rough. That kind of shows you the adversity that they've gone through really all season long, that they're kind of built for that, but it got to be one-sided. That was a heck of a game last night. That's an easy team to root for. I think people call them gritty, but they are gritty, and they kind of have a moxie. And again, they've had some adversity on and off the floor this season, but they're also really good. Amy Williams has put together a really good roster, and for them to beat Michigan twice this year, because I think that's a really good Michigan team, especially how they beat them in Lincoln by 20+, and then to find a way last night to win that game when it looked like, first of all, it wasn't going to go their way, and it was going to go to overtime. I think that says a lot about Amy Williams and what her program represents, and you could tell a lot of people got excited last night. I mean, that was a collective. Everybody was watching, and it was something finally good that everybody could agree on in Husker Nation.
Gary Sharp with us on Hail Varsity Radio. So what are the chances that Nebraska gets a W, the men's team gets a W in the Big Ten tournament?
So right now they would play Maryland, and Maryland's playing really, really well. I don't know. They're a strange team. They just had a strange week. Nobody could have seen Sunday night coming to Penn State. And, of course, we were all like, whoa, what's going on in Columbus? I don't know. This time of the year, it's all about getting hot. I don't know if Nebraska's getting hot or if Trey McGowan's is, he is the Trey McGowan that we expected because he's healthy now and he's kind of the glue guy. I'll be curious to see tomorrow because I know Wisconsin doesn't want to share the Big Ten championship. So the Kohl Center will be rocking once again. We'll see how Nebraska responds to that adversity if things go south, because we know when they've gone south this year, they haven't necessarily they haven't been able to fix it. But look at they've set the pace and they played well the last 2 games. So I'm excited to see what happens. But in the Big Ten tournament, man, I don't like the matchup against Maryland.
No, I don't either. Maryland's had a lot of talent, and they've underachieved. And quite frankly, you had Turgeon bounce out, and Danny Manning took over, and Maryland's got enough dudes to be a tournament team, man, and they just aren't. Gary, want to go to spring football, bud, and I really enjoyed Mickey Joseph's time at the round table. I think he's just big time, and we spent time on bets, and he got pretty detailed into the consistency aspect of bets and the maturity. But I want to get your take. How do you think Omar Manning responds to the Trey Palmer competition and Alante Brown competition in that slot spot?
Well, we would like to say, hey, Omar, finally time. We have no idea what we're going to get out of Omar Manning. And you have to ride the roller coaster. When the coaster is going well, there's all kinds of possibilities. But I would hold off on Omar Manning for this spring. Let's just see if he makes it through spring and how he develops and where he fits. But at this point, Nebraska's in a situation. I don't care about Omar Manning's feelings. If you've got Trey Palmer, who's very talented, and guys behind him that want to get on the field, and it's go time. Like a guy like Xavier Betts, guys, has responded in kind. He's finally, I think Mickey Joseph has invested into Xavier, and I think Xavier has invested into his craft of playing wide receiver, and it's kind of go time for him as well. I like that wide receiver room, but here's the interesting thing for both of you guys. The last couple of years, we haven't been big fans of certain position group coaches. And if a player is not playing, i.e. a Betts, we go, man, Lubick doesn't know what he's doing. If a running back rotation is off kilter, man, Hell doesn't know what he's doing. Hasn't it shifted? Like if Xavier Betts is not on the field in the fall, that's on Xavier. That's not a Mickey Joseph thing. If a particular running back isn't on the field or the rotation is odd, it's not, man, what's Ryan Hell doing? It won't be what's Brian Applewhite doing. It's kind of interesting. Those two guys in particular, this first week, just listening between the lines, they're commanding a lot of respect, and what they do in their respective rooms and who plays during games, that's on the player. That's not going to be going, hey, coach, do you know what you're doing?
That's a good take. I mean, that's the feel.
Well, because you have so many options at a lot of the different spots, but you don't have anything solidified. That's what is really fascinating about this spring. I think, like right now, the only players that you can take to the bank is being like they are going to play a lot for sure. It's Casey Thompson. It's Travis Vokalek. That's pretty much it. Who else? Who else can you sit here and with 100% confidence say, yep, that's a starter, that's a contributor? Especially here in the spring when you have, a couple of the tackles like Prohaska and Turner Corcoran out. Who else can you take to the bank as for sure, surefire, 100% gonna start, gonna make waves?
Well, I'm glad you brought up Prohaska because we'll put him on the side because if he is healthy, he's going to be one of your starting tackles. And then I would probably say Betts and Palmer.
Yeah, you're that confident with Palmer even?
Trey Palmer is everything that they needed in a lot of different ways, Mark, at the wide receiver position and then probably even more of an impact on special teams.
Okay.
And he's a guy that's go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to say, it's tough to think back to a spring, though, with so little solidified.
Yeah.
Right? I can't remember one that's been like it.
Well, and, let's look at running back is, okay, let's play this scenario. You get 3 running backs. Could you make a case that 2 of the 3, one's not going to be able to go until the summer, and the other's not even on campus yet in Allen? I mean, I don't recall ever a time where the running back room was so up in the air, but yet coming back is a guy that started the majority of the games in Ramir Johnson and a couple of guys that you're going, hey, all right, here we go in the spring. But there may be 2 of your top 3 running backs aren't even around in the spring.
They've gone after some talent. You have Applewhite in that transition. We expect Grant to make an immediate impact with JUCO. That's what you want from JUCO guys. It's not always been the case in Lincoln recently, where they'll get an opportunity but they don't stick and stay. Gary Sharp's with us here on Hail Varsity Weekend. Sharpie, I want to go to the defensive line here, bud. And we know Nash Hutmacher, the Polar Bears, been a guy that has seen a little bit of time, but there's more fellas behind him. And Coach Chinander talking about it this week. Guys can't be young anymore what are you hearing? What are you feeling about a guy like Jalen Weaver, Roquan Buckley, and you have Mosai Newsom and then Marquise Black? That's the last 2 years of some hard-fought recruiting in the trenches to make a difference in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and then those guys in particular, they built up physically where they are at least, as they try and figure out their craft, they're at least physically, they're in a good spot to look like a Big Ten defensive lineman. I think the biggest thing for Mike Dawson is you got to keep a couple guys in bubble wrap. You got to keep a Casey Rogers. You got to keep a Ty Robinson. I think that's just important. You can't afford to have those guys go down. You need to protect them because they need to be key cogs. I think it's, like Hutmacher's an interesting guy. We're excited to see him, and there's no doubt he's a bull, and he's going to be tough to move, and he's one of the strongest guys on the roster, if not the strongest guy. Now it's time for him to make a move. And we also don't know how much even an odd front Nebraska will play. But I think Hutmacher's in a good position to play himself into 20 to 25, maybe 30 snaps, depending on what they decide to do with that position and what Nebraska looks like up front coming into the fall. But the thing that'll linger about the defensive line is, and you'll get a sense of how comfortable Nebraska feels about the younger guys that we just mentioned making an impact where you trust them in the fall, is how active is Nebraska in the transfer portal? We saw that right before spring began. They were dropping offers. If they get more aggressive as spring goes on, I think that tells you everything you need to know about that defensive line. But if I'm Mike Dawson, I'm kind of excited to see those guys develop because some of them are, you've been here for a little bit. Now it's go time, and we recruited you for a reason.
Gary, I'm curious what you've heard, if anything, about Jalen Weaver and his physical prowess. And I'm asking because just from a sheer sort of explosiveness and talent perspective, he's like a bigger Steve Warren. He's a bigger Malik Collins in terms of just explosiveness, quickness, sheer athletic ability. But he is huge. I mean, he is a giant human being. But to me, he's sort of like he's got that X factor talent and ability, but what I don't know is, he came in like 50 pounds overweight, and I don't know how that's all coming along. Have you heard anything good, bad, and different?
So he's a project. I mean, that's not the exact phrase that was told to me, but he's a project from his body, and he hasn't played a ton of football. And so they've kind of got like a piece of clay here to mold, but they like what he can do. I think getting him in shape to the body they want, and then getting him to play defensive line the right way. He's a guy that probably at this point in his career thinks way too much because you're young and it's not natural yet. But watch him. I wouldn't be surprised, and I'm glad you brought him up, Mark. I wouldn't be surprised if they put him in some key situations in the spring just to see how he responds, because he's somebody that's definitely on the radar. You just have to figure out a guy that big, what is his role, and how many snaps he could give you a game as well.
Gary Sharp's with us here. Oh, sorry. Go for it, Mark.
Just real quick, Elijah. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
But am I overselling that? I just honestly feel like when you look at high school tape, and it's high school tape, I get it, but his closing speed, his arm length, I mean, he is just built way different, and his athleticism is way different than anybody else. Whether you can put it together is a whole nother question, right? But just in terms of sheer ability, I don't think Nebraska's had much better over the past 10, 20 years.
And he looks like a Big Ten defensive lineman. That's what a Big Ten defensive lineman in the West is supposed to look like. I agree with you. I think he's an interesting guy that really flew under the radar in the recruiting, but he's got an opportunity just because how big he is. But watch him in the spring. If you start to see videos and he's featured, then that's definitely a good thing.
Gary Sharp's with us here, the Saturday morning edition of Hail Varsity Radio. And Gary, Mark had a question for Brandon that I really enjoyed, so I'm going to rehash that question here with you. He asked, essentially, who's the most likely candidate on this Nebraska defense to make an off-schedule play? Nebraska is losing that guy in their 2021 defense in JoJo. He was the most likely guy to make a play in the backfield, make an off-schedule play. So who could the guy be for Nebraska in 2022 that's going to step up and make some off-schedule plays for the defense?
I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to get into the backfield, but I am all in on Quentin Newsom. I think Quentin Newsom gave us enough last year where he showed that he's a good tackler, that he's smart, he's got an instinct to chase the ball. I think he is poised for a big, big season. And that's a guy, this is a defense that still has to create more turnovers, and he's a guy that I think will create havoc in the back end. I think that opposite spot that's open from him at cornerback, that will be a popular place to target by Big Ten teams, because I don't think they're going to want much of Newsome in his second year. And I think that has a lot to do with Quentin Newsome, but I also think it all has a lot to do with the faith that Travis Fisher has put in him that is going to allow Newsome in only his second year, I believe, to be one of the better defensive players on Nebraska's roster.
I think Quentin's been able to get some confidence through some reps and through time on the field, and I'm excited to see him put another year together, Gary, and I think you're right about that with Coach Fisher. Sharp, you're going to flip gears, and some reaction yesterday with Ohio State being interested in Flores out of Gretna. What's your take on this? Obviously, the 2023 and, of course, Junior Day is going on as well with some monster in-state prospects. You have Malachi and Noonan and, of course, Davion Hall for 2023. But where do things stand, in your opinion, for Nebraska with in-state talent now as we look at this 2023 class and reaction to Flores getting Ohio State interest?
Well, let's start with him. He was supposed to be at Junior Day, and they're not going to go anywhere that has not offered their son. We don't know the full extent of why Nebraska's not interested or they're not kicking the tires. I just know there's been little contact since last summer, and there's a lot more interest in him. It's crazy to think that a quarterback at Gretna High School in Nebraska who is getting Power 5 offers can't get the attention of Nebraska. If you're Nebraska, the best way to go at this, if you are still interested in, and your ears have to perk up when you hear that he might be taking a trip to Columbus to go visit with the quarterback whisperer and Ryan Day, is just come back and say, hey, we made a mistake. I don't know what's happened here in the past. We further evaluate it. We really want to move this process down the road. I think you could go that route if you were Nebraska, and that would be received very well. But I don't know, guys. We all talk about him and going to Nebraska and staying home. I don't know that we're going to be able to talk this into existence for some odd reason, and those offers and that attention is going to continue to pile up. I mean, people will lose their mind if a kid in the Omaha metro area goes to Ohio State at quarterback and never received an offer from the in-state school.
Gary, isn't it one of those things just like, what is the worst that can happen? I'm serious. Like, what's the worst that can happen by offering and recruiting him and he shows up? Like what? Is he going to take away from is he going to be a locker room cancer? Is he not going to work hard enough?
Do you lose Watson? I mean, that's the other thing.
Well, I think nowadays, guys, at that position, I mean, Nebraska just went out shopping, and they got two guys that could be their number one and number two quarterback. I don't think you have to worry about anybody's feelings, but if you are committed to Watson and that's the kind of quarterback you want, and you're the guy that gets to decide if we're going to offer scholarships, and you don't like a particular thing about a quarterback, we can't force that coach to sign off on a scholarship. There's too many things that say, here's a four-year starter at a Class A school that won a state championship that in your stadium in the wind threw darts through, and everybody says, man, that kid is big time. It's really kind of an interesting process, but I don't think Nebraska's out of it, but I think Nebraska would have to, if they were going to get into this derby, they would have to say, hey, we made a mistake. Let's move forward. This is what we like. Here's an offer. But there's a lot telling me that's not going to happen. He's going to continue to get offers from Big 12 schools, Big 10 schools, and, it's not guaranteed that he's going to get an offer from Ohio State. But, again, a state where it doesn't produce a lot of high school quarterbacks, somebody's getting an interest from the Ohio State. That has to make Nebraska go, let's go through frame by frame to figure out why we don't like him, why we like him, and what we're going to do, and either do it and offer a scholarship or move on because it's doing nobody good.
Sharpie, we'll get you out of here. State basketball gets rocking on Monday. How are you feeling about Class A? Is there a dark horse, and is there a favorite? I know there's the obvious seedings, but, man, the Metro is so good this year.
Well, I'm particularly biased towards Omaha West Side, and they've got a really, really good team. They spent the majority of the year at number one. I think it's going to be an interesting Class A tournament. I will give you who I think will be the favorite, and they're the number 2 seed, but they're kind of quiet, is Bellevue West. I think Doug Woodard has got a really good team. It doesn't have Chucky, it doesn't have Frankie, but they are well built, and they have Acola Rope's brother who joined them in the second semester. I like Bellevue West, but I think it's going to be a great Class A boys state basketball tournament, and I think it'll be unique for everybody with the boys and girls going on at the same time in Lincoln, and hopefully we can adopt this format where you are playing every other day, because I think we'll see the basketball and the championship games be a lot better because you're not playing 3 games in 3 days.
Mm-hmm. Very fair. Gary, have a great weekend, brother. Thanks for the time, and we'll check in next week.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Take care. Gary Sharp with us, the Iron Horse, Hail Varsity Radio. Just good stuff from him, as always, on the Metro Kraynak with the Flores situation. But, you just wonder about Nebraska has seen Flores throw. You wonder about the previous evaluation and how much evaluation's gone on with the new quarterback guy. And we'll see. We'll see where it shakes out. I like Watson, but I would be sick if I'm a Nebraska fan and a guy like Flores gets away to a peer school.
Was McCaffrey a better thrower?
No.
Okay. There we go.
Kraynak, have a good weekend, man.
You as well.